Welcome to the Enchanted Astrology podcast with Ariel Smith. Thank you so much for being here today. This episode is the very first of an 11-part series I'll be sharing with you called the Quantum Zodiac. Now, this series is a vision that has been slowly forming for me over the past year, as astrology has been revealing itself to me in these very new and unexpected ways. And I believe this perspective has the potential to deepen our understanding of astrology as a truly multi-dimensional language, and to help us discover new ways of working with it as we become more aware of our own multi-dimensional nature. And I know the word quantum is often used quite loosely, and part of my intention with this series is to help ground what I mean by that term, especially as it relates directly to us, rather than just as some distant or abstract concept. So this series tells the story of how we move from our infinite eternal selves into a manifested physical experience. Now, I do want to offer a clear disclaimer. I am not a quantum physicist, a mathematician, or a professional in that field. I am currently in my 4th year of a bachelor's degree majoring in psychology, so I do have some experience with university level math and science, and I'm deeply curious by nature. I research these topics for my own interest and understanding, but that's the extent of my formal background. This series emerged in a way that just felt deeply profound and intuitive, and I trust it because it came through something greater than me. Now, in the first episode, I'll be sharing the story of the planets and how they participate in the process of moving us from a quantum, unlimited state into our human experience. This episode will just serve as an overview, so it'll introduce the arc of the series, how it unfolds, and the role each planet plays. From there, each episode will take a deeper dive into an individual planet, its function, its relationship to its ruling signs, and how we can understand it through a deeper, expanded lens that just goes beyond traditional interpretations. So I will begin by sharing how this concept first came to me. And it started as a deep intuition that collectively we don't yet fully understand Neptune. And I began to sense that this was because we don't yet fully understand the nature of reality itself. For a long time, we've approached the world as something solid. It's concrete, it's objectively quote-unquote real, while Neptune was said to govern illusions, dreams, things that aren't quote-unquote real. And I knew this framing just wasn't quite right, even though I didn't yet have the language to really explain that. So I went on a journey, one that felt very much guided by Neptune, to better understand what this planet is truly pointing to. And what we're now discovering, both scientifically and philosophically, is that the world is not quite what it appears to be. The material world may be more accurately described as a kind of appearance or projection, while ultimate reality exists beyond form within a unified quantum field. This realization doesn't make Neptune wrong in any way. Every traditional association still holds, it's still valid. It's our understanding of what those associations mean that begins to shift. So as an example, Neptune governs dream and illusion, and dreams speak to us through symbolic language. In a dream, nothing is literal. Everything is symbolic. It's created by us to help us understand something or to process information or receive insight. And what if our waking reality functions in a similar way? It's another dream, another type of a dream. It's symbolic, meaningful, and participatory. We are making it for us. As above, so below, as within, so without kind of thing. And I often think, how would we ever conceptualize or understand what it means to dream if we didn't have the experience of a dream? We didn't have something to relate to it. So seen through this lens, Neptune still governs the dream state, but now that dream state extends into our perceived waking reality itself. And in order for there to be a dream, there must be something that's dreaming. This points to what we often call the higher self, that state of being of perfect unity, coherence, perfect peace. Now, following this thread led me to what is known as positive geometry, which are geometrical structures that exist outside of conventional space and time. And they are described and seen through mathematics. And these geometries are basically revealed through mathematical language, which is honestly just endlessly fascinating. And this exploration eventually brought me to what we currently refer to as the amplitohedron. And that is one of, I would say, the more famous maybe or well-known positive geometries that gets referenced is this amplitohedron. And it's a structure in theoretical physics that helps to describe how possibilities become observable outcomes. And this is referred to as scattering amplitudes, hence the name amplitohedron. And amplitudes are like frequencies. So when I first saw an image of an amplitohedron, it immediately reminded me of the kite pattern in astrology, and I knew that there were parallels here. So as I continued researching, I learned that the amplitohedron operates within a framework of supersymmetry, and that's basically something that doesn't directly reflect our everyday physical experience. But it's more of an idealized or a unified type of a level of reality, not the one that we're currently experiencing. So this led me to wonder what kind of geometry might correspond to physics of this world that we actually experience. And that search brought me to the truncated octahedron, and this is a geometric form with 14 faces. And symbolically, this felt very significant because if we imagine Neptune as corresponding to the geometry of the dodecahedron, which has 12 faces representing a state of perfect symmetry and infinite potential, and I correspond the 12 faces to the 12 signs of the zodiac, then introducing a geometry with 14 faces introduces something new. And how do you account for the 2 extra faces? Well, you can through direction. An entry point or an entry gate and an exit gate, a beginning and an end. And this is where the process started to really unfold, because in physics, interactions are often described through creation and annihilation events. There's something called creation and annihilation operators. And these are points where something begins and something ends. And this felt familiar because this is the realm of Pluto. And in evolutionary astrology, Pluto represents the soul's purpose, the force that creates direction, pressure, and transformation. So it's defining a path through experience. Now, when physicists calculate these interactions at the quantum level, they often use what is called a Feynman diagram, which visually it maps out all the possible ways an interaction could unfold. And what's fascinating is that out of all of those possibilities, the outcome follows the path of least resistance. It ends up being the most efficient route. And when you look at an image of these Feynman diagrams, they look sort of like an H, I guess, that's been stretched out and the sides are somewhat slanted. So we have this image of sort of like an H type of a thing. And we're dealing with an intelligence that can instantaneously calculate infinite possibilities into the most efficient outcome. And this is where I saw Uranus. So from that point on, the entire process began to unfold very rapidly, and it revealed this sequence and a flow to how we move from a state of infinite potential into this lived experience. So consciousness begins as infinite possibility, and somehow it becomes you, a body, a mind, an identity, a point of view that seems to be moving through time. And astrology, from this context, is the story of how that happens. So the planets are laws, they are functions, they are stages of this organization. And so this series will follow consciousness as it moves from wave to form into self-awareness. So our journey will start with Neptune and will end with the Sun. So we're going to move through the planets in a very intentional order. And it might not be the traditional order, but there is a very specific sequence that I want to describe. So we begin with Neptune, and that's because Neptune represents what physics calls the wave function, which is the field of all possible states before anything becomes defined. And we end with the Sun because the Sun represents our linear awareness, identity on this level, our consciousness focused into this linear experience to give this sense of who we are. So again, this will be a summary just to get us orientated to this idea. So Neptune is the wave function. Neptune represents infinite potential. In physics, the wave function describes all possible states that a system could take before anything is observed or defined. In astrology, Neptune governs imagination, intuition, dreams, mysticism, same function, different language. Neptune is where everything exists at once. And when we look at the symbol for the wave function, it is exactly the same symbol that we use for Neptune. So then from Neptune, I move on to Pluto as the scattering amplitude or quantum transition, because Pluto is that moment that something changes state, that perfect coherent field of Neptune wants to change from possibility into experience. And in astrology, Pluto rules death, rebirth, transformation, power. Pluto is the gates of Hades, the thresholds, So this is the moment where that change is established, a direction is established, a path is established. And now Uranus, we move from Neptune to Pluto, and now we jump to Uranus, which I call the Feynman diagram because it is the calculation of all those different quantum possibilities into the how of how they come about, and that's always through the path of least resistance. So Uranus governs that sudden insight, innovation, disruption, liberation. And in physics, systems reorganize toward greater efficiency, choosing the path of least resistance. And Uranus is the intelligence of evolution itself, which is always rewiring pathways for our highest timeline and ultimately our highest level of freedom. So now, at this point in our journey, we're still at the level of the quantum, which is the level of potential, of non-locality, of things existing in these probabilistic states. And Saturn comes in, and Saturn is what translates the level from the quantum into a lived experience, into something we can measure. And this is done through the process of quantization. So Saturn is where reality becomes measurable. And in physics, Planck's constant is what defines the smallest unit of action. And it translates the moment that this vibration state becomes energy that can be translated into matter. And in astrology, Saturn governs structure. It governs limits, responsibility, and form. So Saturn here is showing us how it's creating a physical experience from something that exists within this infinite sea of potential. And actually, when we look at the symbol for Saturn, that H bar symbol, that happens to be the exact same symbol used for the reduced Planck's constant. And the reduced Planck's constant is how we get quantization, which is creating a little packet of energy, the smallest unit of action. They are the exact same symbol. So from Neptune to Pluto to Uranus, we are talking about the fundamental principles of quantum mechanics. And as we go from Saturn down, make our way down towards the sun, we're now talking about the fundamental laws of physics. And so Saturn is quantization, and now we go into Jupiter, which is the law of gravity. So in physics, gravity curves space-time, and it creates this alignment, this consistency. You have this meaning, you have planets orbiting each other and creating systems. In astrology, Jupiter rules wisdom, growth, belief, and meaning. So Jupiter is that harmonizing force that draws all experience toward unity, synchronicity, and greater wholeness. So it's turning experience into understanding. So from there we move to Mars. And Mars is the law of thermodynamics. Mars is action. And in thermodynamics, energy is what moves systems forward. And specifically, it is looking at how the microcosm affects the macrocosm. Do we move towards entropy? What little microscopic states affect the movement of energy into the macrocosm? And in astrology, Mars governs drive, our desire, motivation, and our momentum. So Mars is what's turning that potential into movement, into momentum. So from Mars, we move to Venus. And Venus is the law of electromagnetism. So Venus governs attraction, right? Harmony and what we value. And in physics, electromagnetism governs how things attract and repel. So this is the intelligence of connection. So next up, we have Mercury. And Mercury is the law of relativity, also known as the speed of light. Mercury governs the movement of energy and information. So the universal constant that defines our communication, perception, and the interconnectedness of all points across space-time. And in astrology, Mercury rules communication, perception, language, and thought. So Mercury is the flow of meaning between points. Now, last up, we have the luminaries, the sun and the moon. And the sun represents our left brain, the left hemisphere of our brain that we typically associate with logical and that linear functioning. It is what can read and interpret this experience that we have set up in the concept of time, as we've created an experience to unfold across time. Our left logical type of mind is able to perceive it that way and able to understand it that way. And the moon is our right brain. It's the more creative, intuitive, aware of our connectedness to so much more than our left brain could ever consciously be aware of. So in this way, it's essentially our higher awareness. So that is the arc and the unfolding journey that this Quantum Zodiac series will be focusing on, taking a deeper dive into each planet and exactly how it functions in its role, how it gets expressed through that multi-dimensional lens, as well as how our current associations with them are actually perfectly translated. So it just deepens our understanding in astrology. So I hope this was helpful. As always, trust what resonates and feel free to leave the rest. If you'd like to continue exploring this work, stay tuned for the upcoming episodes in the Quantum Zodiac series, where we'll move through each planet, exploring its traditional meanings, how it relates to the quantum perspective, and the rich synchronicities that emerge when these worlds meet. If you feel called to take a deeper dive, I also have a library on my website where these concepts are taught through modern, relatable archetypes inspired by the fairy tales we all know and love. And this work is designed to draw the understanding from the inside out, rather than through memorization or the traditional educational lens. So by engaging your imagination, you begin to realize that this wisdom is already within you. It's simply a matter of learning how to access it and just simply trusting your knowing. So the library supports that process along with the Yin Yoga Studio. which is there to support your journey on a somatic level as well. So I'm so grateful to everyone who took the time to be here with me today. I'll be back soon with the weekly astrology update and with the next episode in the Quantum Zodiac series. Until then, thank you for listening.